Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Inside Austin's Agenda. I'm your host, Grace Reader. Today we're doing something a little bit different. Like we just discussed, I think people don't get the opportunity often to speak directly to each other on television very much. So that's the goal today. Today we've got Jeffery Bowen, a former mayoral candidate, an entrepreneur in Austin, and Kathy Mitchell, who has been a longtime advocate here in the city of Austin. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So first and foremost, if I could have you all both start. You all first, you've just met. For everyone who you've shaken hands, you've now met. I'd first like you to start by talking to each other about your position on Prop Q and why that's where you are.
Okay. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. I favor Prop Q because for a number of different reasons. Austin is facing a structural deficit in the general fund, and the general fund is what pays for police, fire, EMS, parks, libraries, all the things that people think of as their services that they're expecting from the city. And so this will resolve that, as well as allow us to continue growing some programs that I believe, like the EMS first responder programs, that I believe we have seen proof of concept and are successful and should be grown. So that's why I support this TRE.
Well, I'm not supporting the TRE or Prop Q, primarily because council has failed, once again, in their responsibilities to watch their spending and how they spend. They constantly want to blame somebody else, whether it be the legislature, whether it be the feds, and yet continue to still spend as if the money just grows on the trees in our backyards. And I've even said that to them, that they need to start taking responsibility for their spending. It's not the governor and it's not the president, past or present, sitting on the dais up there with them, telling them how to spend. They're doing this all on their own. And they've put us in this situation over the years. So I cannot stand by and let them have more money when they haven't done their due diligence in trying to deal with our deficit.
Is there anything the other said that you thought, I don't agree with that?
I would say I disagree in part. I believe that indeed there are some expenses that the city has taken on for me, and I was very clear on this last year. The police contract was one we could not afford. We needed a police contract, but that one cost too much. And it is very much part of the structural deficit that we now face. So yes, in my view, has council made some decisions that I wish we could unravel? Sure. I also believe that there is a new set of issues related to the state and federal funds. So the example that I like to use, because it's so familiar to everybody, the federal government cut a lot of NGO grants this spring. It took a minute for that to roll forward, but one of those grants was Meals on Wheels. So Meals on Wheels joined the coalition that I have been part of for the past few years, the community investment budget, and said, we're going to have a big problem. And we asked the city to pick that up. Meals on Wheels is something that our seniors rely on to stay in their homes. And the city said, yes, we will pick that up. So I think, yes, has the city bought some things it couldn't afford? Sure. Is the city also facing some new gaps in funding that it didn't and couldn't predict? Yes. And if you combine those things, you end up with a situation where the city either passes Prop Q or has to make steep cuts to what people consider to be core services. And when you look at the city of Dallas, for example, where the sort of national balance of the changes that are happening have also hit Dallas, and they chose not to go to the voters, and they're having to eliminate their pools. They're cutting 9 public pools because relative to other things, keeping public pools open is expensive. In Austin, if we have to go to those lengths to cover this deficit, we're going to be cutting parks too, because that's the next biggest thing after public safety. And when you need big dollars, you go to where all the big dollars are. So that's where I would say agree in part, disagree in part.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason for having civilized conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I have no disagreement over the police contract. I thought it was kind of out, but there again, that was something that recently had to be taken care of based upon issues that happened in the past, very long ago, to where there was police officers leaving, all of those type of issues. I will also agree that there are things that there were monies that are not followed through, only primarily because we have a $37 trillion federal deficit. There's some issues that I think that the city has taken on that maybe they are worthwhile, but yet I find the city has not set up any performance standards in many cases on many programs, which then leads to other issues of trying to be, where's the transparency? But when we start looking at things like what will we cut, what will we not do, those type of things, the city, in my 35 years of living here, has done a very good job at always wanting to extort the taxpayers by saying we'll have to do this or we'll have to do that without going through and even tightening their own budget. You're probably more than aware that we have a $700 million deferred maintenance for our own city parks, which I find that to be reprehensible in the fact that we talk about our parks, yet we continue to push and kick this can down the road. So yeah, there's a lot of issues out there that need to be addressed. And the problem I find with it is that city council doesn't listen. They listen to the few. They don't listen really totally all the way around. And that is one of the reasons. Hopefully this will get their attention. We'll have to see.
Well, do I want city council to listen to people more? Absolutely. Again, agree in part. I think that many of us feel like we're having an I told you so right now about the scope of the police contract. However, the structural deficit is not small. It's quite significant. We're looking at 33 million now, growing to 80 million over 5 years. That is not something that you're going to find money in the couch cushions. I fought vociferously against a dumb consulting contract that we were going to do a couple of years back for McKinsey to study something that had been studied 1,000 times. $2 million. So I agree with you. We shouldn't have had to go in as a community and say no as loudly as we did for that to not happen. And it didn't happen. But $2 million is not what we're talking about.
Right.
And finding $1 million here and $1 million there and $5 million over here isn't going to resolve any of the issues that we face right now. So I think that we're in the same stuck point that Dallas is in. I don't want us to start walking back. The new commitment to our park maintenance, to your point, yes, we allowed park maintenance to, be constantly where we looked for cuts for years. This council has not gone to the voters year over year over year, and we have had the lowest levels of property tax increases. We have had increases, but they have been very small for the last 3 years. So as we tried to do that, as we tried to tuck ourselves in without going to the voters, still allowing for the wages of our workers to go up a little And that's where most of the increase is, right? It's in cost of living for our workers. That's most of the budget, the general fund. They did that relatively, I used to call it false austerity. We are not in an austerity environment in Austin, but we were presented with a false austerity budget over and over. So I think that for me, I know that there are things that they don't need to be doing, and I look forward to us finding them. But I also know, having been pretty closely engaged in the budget process for the last 4 years, that it isn't going to find us $30 or $40 million. And it's not going to find us $80 million in 2 or 3 years. So I would like Austin to see that we're not Dallas. We're not going to close down our public pools. They're a gem in our city that we all love. I love mine. And we're not going to walk back our commitment to closing the gap in park maintenance, which we have been doing. If we're not going to walk those things back, we've got our cuts before, and we can't name the thing that we're going to cut that actually gives us the money to cover the structural deficit, then we should vote for this. And they're not going to be back next year, and they're not going to be back the year after. That's not true. This is going to cover us from now for the near future, next few years. And we will actually be on a stable financial foundation.
Well, 33 million in the big picture with the 6.3, that's less than 0.5%. If they can't find that, now mind you, we just met, so you don't really know, having a construction background and also being with the federal government, building stuff for them, I always had to stay on track on budgets. So I look at this from a standpoint of going, it is being done. Different places have audits, different places have financial responsibilities to do these type of things. We wouldn't be in this particular position had council looked and said, where are we at? And I praise our current city manager for wanting to present what the budget looks like several years out, so that it gives them something to look at, because let's be honest, there's only a couple of people in the council right now that have ever had any actual business experience and have very little experience in what it takes to actually write a check to another place for services, whatever the case is, besides their utilities, whatever the case is. The issue there is that they haven't taken this seriously in the past. This is not just the present, this is also in the past, and we're having to make up for the past that has come back to haunt us. I still find it very difficult that if the city manager can provide us with a budget that says, this is balanced, yes, there's 33 million in here, but we've got this taken care of, but you need to look at this, and yet they still added amendments and added issues to the current budget, that's not being responsible to the residents, to the taxpayers, and to those people that love the different issues and even put certain programs in jeopardy. And that's where I find the portion of this is that many on council from past and present seem to treat this like it's a big monopoly game, and it's not. You're putting people's lives, putting people's futures and what happens to them. All of these things impact the residents, whether or not somebody can stay here because their taxes have been increased and they have to move out, whether they're old or young. That's part of the game of trying to be responsible.
I'd like to take on two pieces of that.
Sure.
The general fund is $1.6 billion. The larger city budget is largely our utilities. So taking money from Austin Energy to bring it to put it in the general fund occurs by increasing electric rates. So there isn't like we don't pay if we find money in Austin Energy. that money is based on the rates that people pay. And many other decisions having to do with where we buy energy and all of that stuff, right? So imagine Austin Energy as a business over here.
And it is a business.
And it is a business, that's right. And it needs to make a profit, a very small one, but nonetheless, it makes a profit. And that little profit is what goes into the general fund. So we all want Austin Energy to make a profit. But we can't dictate to Austin Energy that you're going to make $100 million more money next year, and so that solves it. That's part of that. We can't do that. So what we have realistically, if we're not going to start jacking with people's utility bill, which makes no sense at all, sorry about my French, is we have the general fund, which is primarily funded through your property taxes. So we're not talking about a $6 billion ocean that we need to find $33 million. We're talking about a $1.6 billion big lake. And we need to find 33 this year, up to 80 in the out years. And those are real, I believe, the current forecast. So that's actually a pretty big chunk. Now we're talking about having to find 8-9% of the general fund in cuts. The city manager did not balance the budget. He produced a budget that was the starting point for a conversation. But for example, it included cuts to the animal center and cuts to the library. It did not continue to fill the gap for our park maintenance. Those were things that were added because we are committed to continuing to fill the gap in our park maintenance. So he gave everybody a starting point for a conversation. It covered the police contract, sort of, except that once you add libraries back in, maybe it didn't, right? So if this thing fails, they're going to reopen the entire budget, and they're going to have to. And that could result in, well, no one has come up with anything that looks like what the cuts need to be. So it's very likely, based on politics and Austin being what it is, that EMS will take a disproportionate share of that hit, along with libraries and parks. Why? Because those are bigger budgets. A large portion of what's in this TRE funds needed growth in our EMS and in our integral care teams, where we address mental illness with EMS with a health care and a mental health care response. This is something we've grown in the past few years. It's something that we did for the first time, starting not very long ago. I've been working towards it for most of my career, and I'm very happy with the outcomes. And we see the success and the growth in that program, the way to address mental illness better than we have been, which we've been pretty bad at it, is in this TRE. The likelihood that we will continue to walk past, in my mind, is very low, because we won't even be able to give our workers a 3% pay increase. So we'll be looking at everything.
Well, when you talk about Austin Energy, they recently did a District 10 meeting, and they came right out and they stated 12% goes back to the city, goes back to the city council. And what I find throughout this entire conversation that has finally kind of gotten started with many people that are unaware is that the service fees that are on our utility bills for all of these things, those go to run those departments. That is actually a tax. It's a fee, but it's a tax. So yes, Austin Energy is part of it, that they contributed just less than $150 million last year. This year, I don't remember what the number is right offhand with all the numbers running around. But the fact that there's going to be issues even within Austin Energy the fact that the budget shows that we're going to give all of the ratepayers a $50 over the year, or less than $60 over the year cut, I would have much rather saw that be zero versus a cut, because at some point in time that's going to come back and haunt us. So there's no foresight in looking at a lot of these things. So you're right. The city manager provided them a budget and said, here's a starting place to start. You need to be able to do this. But yet only one council member looked at the budget and said, what about here? What about there? The rest of them just basically said, I just want to spend more, versus going through here and trying to find something reasonable that is able to keep us from having to increase the taxes. 3.5%, was done by the legislature in 2019 from 8%. Yet again, that was 5 years ago when this went into effect, and yet we still can't, the city council cannot seem to get out of its way from wanting to spend more and more over that. I mean,
Well, it hasn't done that until this year.
well, but even at that, Kirk Watson, even in one of his Watson Wires, said, this has become unaffordable here. That's a direct quote right out of one of his Watson Wires. So there comes a point to where we have to look at this and say, all right, what is it that we actually value? And yes, we need to make hard decisions and learn the hard lessons. But I don't think we have anybody up at the leadership levels that's willing to do that. They're more willing to just go, well, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that.
I would disagree with that, because I have been deeply involved in the budget process the past four cycles, and they are absolutely looking for what can be cut. Now, their values say we don't start with the services to the most indigent. I will say that. So they're not cutting, there's a program that Ryan Alter has been speaking to for the past couple of cycles, where when somebody is about to be evicted, we examine whether or not a $500 assistance in some, maybe they need their car fixed or whatever it is that's causing them to be unable to pay their rent, whether we could actually keep them out of homelessness in the first place by having some kind of programmatic way to step in and provide these very, very small incremental bits of assistance that can keep people in their homes and give them a chance to, get stable again. And they've just started doing this, and it works. It has proven to, if you look at and there is a lot of data, the new ECHO report on our unhoused population just came out maybe a week ago. And they do track, and they do look at data, and they do look at trends. And they do look at which programs are working and how they're working and for how long and for whom. And so, I opposed the marshalling yard. I did when it was created. It was not the version of a service that I thought we needed to start providing, because I thought we would end up having to keep providing it, and maybe we could do something better and smarter. But now that we're here, the marshalling yard is actually taking a lot of people off the street. And those people who live there want it to stay, because they can say what the benefit is, and they have to wait a year for something better, because that's what our wait list is right now. So, I feel like when you're in the budget process and you start digging into all of these different programs, and we can all have an opinion about what we think cities should or shouldn't be doing, but when you look at the programs and who's benefiting and in what way and how they all fit together, the picture turns out to be not so bad. And what we've invested in is enormously less expensive than arresting people and putting them in jail, which is what we were doing before.
Well, when you talk about, nobody was talking about, they were all looking for cuts. Well, I attended every one of the budget town halls across the city.
Oh, they were terrible.
I'm not going to go. There was some of them I thought there were going to be a breakdown brawl, but that was fine. But
I will agree with you on that, sir.
I attended every one of them except for two. One of them was at 2:00 in the afternoon at the last minute, but every one that I attended, I know a certain person that got their question or was in the cards and asked when they took cards that said, "What have you looked at to cut or look for savings in these things?" Not one council person ever said, "I found this" or "I found that." In fact, Councilmember Fuentes even said, when the question was asked, she said, "Well, I just have more spending that I need to do." And I mean, it was actually, it's on video, that's at City Council, that was provided by Jen Robichaud. So I mean, there was constantly that there. So I'm not trying to disagree with you, but I'm just saying, it may be what they were saying there, but what they're saying to the public out there, they were not looking for any way to say when they were talking about this. I saw them, wait a minute, hang on a second, please.
That's okay.
They had their chances to talk to residents, and yet they constantly had another list of what they wanted to add. So to this entire thing, I mean, even the statesmen, when they come out today and said that the council has been not very diligent in the fact of wanting to make sure that programs had some type of measurable performance or accountability, which, as I told Grace earlier, I could have swore I thought hell froze over this morning when that came out and I saw what they wrote. So that in itself, we all have our different perspectives on this. You have yours, I have mine. I just think that there's a lot to unpack with this entire thing. This entire prop affects people differently. Whether or not my two elderly aunts are going to be able to stay in their home that they've been in since the 60s because of an increase in taxes is yet to be seen. How many other people do we know that are right on the verge of not being able to stay because they're fixing to be taxed out of their homes? Yes, programs are there. Some of these people don't qualify for the programs, or they don't even know about the programs. And this, being on city council is not an easy job. Looking at a budget is not an easy job, but it's the job they signed up to do, and they're not doing a very good job at it.
Well, I would say that they could all do a better job. But in this moment, like, of course, and our programs could have better metrics.
A lot better metrics.
I would agree with that.
A lot better.
And
We're just now putting them in.
Well, and to the point of the ECHO report that came out, I think it's a good model for how to move forward in other areas. To be perfectly honest, the area where I know the most, which is public safety, we don't have good metrics for our police department. We really don't. We have some things that people always say when the police want more money, but we don't have metrics that show anything like whether the activities that they're doing every day with their staff time are actually making us safer. They do not. And so do we need metrics? Yes. And I haven't seen the Statesman. I have no idea what they said. But,
well, I have several quotes I'd love to share with you.
Well, there you go. But I will say that I haven't heard anyone explain how we are going to run the city if Prop Q doesn't pass, because we will be looking at reopening the police contract, because that's where a lot of the money is. We will be looking at having to have a really hard conversation with our firefighters, because they have a contract coming sometime soon, and that has got long-term structural impacts. We're going to have a really hard conversation with our EMS folks, because a lot of the EMS money is in this TRE, like is wasn't in the original idea that was put forward by our city manager. So, from a public safety perspective alone, which is where most of the money is, it's very hard for me to see how this works out for anyone.
Well, as you know, they wrote the police contract a while back. They've signed it. There was a lot of contention about the whole thing. I remember when it was brought up under the last city manager, and then it got, basically tossed in a can. Let's start all over. The fire department has got a tentative agreement, as you know.
Yep.
There's still some back and forth on that. EMS has already had their contract awarded to them. Whether or not we're able to go back and open those up, I find that very, very hard to believe that will ever happen.
If we didn't, then the answer to this TRE is that all we will be doing is paying for police.
Well,
Because that's that's if we don't reopen the police contract, then the structural problem that was created last year when we paid too much for that will be the driving factor behind everything else.
Well,
So, I just think that's not where we should be, and it's not where we need to be.
Well,
And I want to respond on the affordability issue for a minute. I'm happy to say that yay, taxpayers can now go to Truth in Taxation on the Travis County website and find out exactly what the impact on your taxes is going to be, and whether you feel that you want to pay that for all the things that are in this TRE. We don't have to argue about that anymore. You can go to the website and look it up. You have to go to the City of Austin section, not the summary. So scroll down, find the City of Austin tax section on your Travis County Truth in Taxation website, and you can actually see the tax amount that you will be asked to pay by the City of Austin in the coming year, and then you can pull out last year's tax bill and see what happened.
and it's ironic that most people don't even look at that, because their taxes and their insurance is paid through, through their escrow accounts. In many cases, my house is paid off, so I have to write that check every year. So I'm more than aware of what's going on with that. Yet, many people do not understand that if this passes, that they will be hit and their escrow accounts will be short, and they will be getting a notice from their mortgage company that says, you owe us X amount of money.
Or maybe they won't, because depending on many factors.
Trust me, most people I know they're going to be hit.
People over 65 are getting, thanks to those same people that we don't necessarily always love their decisions, but they did give people over 65 and people with disabilities a significantly higher homestead exemption this year.
It went up to $195,000.
194, 100, yes.
Yeah, it's 100.
A little under 200.
Well,
That's all I can ever remember, round zeros.
right, and so that's a very valid point, and I've made sure that whenever I'm talking to people and saying, make sure you have your exemptions, make sure if you have any disabilities or other exemptions, you need to make sure that those are current. We recently, the group that I'm with, we recently had a briefing by the tax office and went through that whole process, and it was very enlightening for many people.
It makes a big difference.
And really educating the voters and educating residents, even renters that need to understand. They can even go to that same website and type in the address where they're at, and they can see, oh, wait a minute, I'm renting this place from this person, whatever the case is. Do they have any exemptions? No, they shouldn't, because they're not, and so on and so forth, so that they can kind of see what's going to happen to them also, because that's a very valid point. The whole progress, or the whole process for me, has just been, if we don't understand over time that they have kicked some of these things down the road, and now we're at this point that they're not doing us any services or any justices for the entire process that has happened to us.
We have
You're talking about
people can go unelect their council members. That is a different decision.
That's totally true.
We do not want to put our city on a fundamentally unstable foundation financially because we're mad at a particular council office.
And we'll see what happens next November.
And that is another conversation.
That's another conversation. But
We'll do another show then. You guys can come back
on. But once again, the fact that it's getting people a little more involved, I find that to be very good. The fact that I'm hearing from people on both sides of the aisle going, no, I can't do this anymore. And so it's been very interesting to watch the entire dynamics of this whole process, but we didn't get in this shape overnight. We're not going to be able to get out of this shape overnight, and there's going to have to be some tough decisions. I doubt very seriously that they will open up the police contract, the fire contracts, all of those different things. Those are kind of baked in, and that would be...
They're not baked in. They have a clause that says if the TRE fails, this contract can be reopened.
So they based all these contracts on the fact that they were already going to be putting in a TRE, which goes back to even one of the ordinances that they wrote back in May, and the council signed off on it, saying that all of this was supposed to be very transparent. The amount of money, all of those issues were supposed to be...
That was discussed publicly.
Well, I'm just saying, and at what point, because those issues, based upon what that ordinance says, and it's block number 3, doesn't follow with what they've even said in the actual ballot language, because they only name out the few things. The part where it says financial stability, and then the city council can then use the money however they wish to do,
well, I understand
which is part of the ballot.
Some people have a dispute about how specific the ballot language needs to be. I don't know anything about that, to be honest. But what I do know is that it is 100% true that this TRE gives us financial stability. So we can disagree about the level of granularity that should have been written into that thing, but it does do that in a way that nothing else can.
Sorry to cut you all off.
No, it's
I know
okay.
that both of you could talk about this all day, and
Apparently.
This has been absolutely lovely to sit here and ask no questions and just watch you all go back and forth and have a discussion with each other and talk to your neighbor about something that you all disagree with. This has been delightful. Before we wrap up here, is there sort of any last remarks or any last things that you all would like to say?
You need to pay attention as to how this is going to affect you. Everybody's going to be affected one way or another. And you need to be smart before you go on November 4th, or even the fact that early voting starts on Monday. You really need to understand what are the impacts. How is this really going to affect you? And maybe I need to start getting more involved. So I highly encourage you to go look at the tax rate. Look at the piece of property. If you're a renter, go look at the piece of property. Even if you're in an apartment complex, you can kind of see and do the math. But you need to be paying attention to how this is going to impact you. And it will be an impact, one way or the other.
And I would say the same thing. I believe that budgets are a reflection of our values, and that in Austin, we have been making strides in taking care of the least among us. And this is a moment where we can either continue to do that, and we're talking about our mental illness alternative first responders. We're talking about improvements in how we maintain our parks. We're talking about Meals on Wheels for our seniors. We can either continue to try to be there for ourselves, which is that moment that we're in, because nobody else is going to be there for us. And we can think about that as we vote. So yes, I hope that people do educate themselves. what is it that we are getting? And how much is it if I'm a homeowner, how much is it going to cost? If I'm a renter, to be honest, there's a whole market component to the cost of rent that is, we've been on a roller coaster. Everything went way up and now it's going down. So I don't think a renter can simply kind of go into their landlord's apartment complex tax register and understand much about how this is going to impact their lease next year.
Well, they'll at least be able to see how much taxes they're paying.
Sure. But I know that, the marketplace is a thing.
Oh, yeah. Marketplace is a thing.
And it is in motion right now in Austin.
But if they look at it, then they shouldn't be surprised if their landlord raises their rent the next time their lease comes up and understand.
Look around.
Oh, yeah.
There's
You'll
cheaper apartments.
That's right.
And they're coming online fast.
Well,
I have a young granddaughter, 19 years old, who's coming into her own in the world, and I'm learning all about things that I haven't thought about since I was 19 years old.
And let me say, as somebody that builds for a living, there's a bottom line as to what they know, what they have to have to maintain that.
I understand that.
Yeah. I know. We do, because we have years of experience. I mean, you're only 39, but life experiences are something to learn from, where many of them have not. So
there you go.
Okay.
Well,
on that note,
again, yeah, that was a great way to end.
Thank you.
That was a beautiful moment to end on. Well, thank you all for doing this. This has been really nice to sit here and listen to you all discuss what you believe, and hopefully people can learn from listening to their neighbors and having conversations with their own neighbors, very much like this. So thank you both for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Grace.
And thank you all for watching. A reminder that Inside Austin's Agenda airs every other Thursday. We'll see you next time.